Another episode. This time we're both hungover, so that's great. Still my guilty pleasure movie, I think.
I can remember sitting in the theater and seeing the teaser trailer for this movie, being like really excited.
My name is George, and with me is Chris, and today we are going over the movie Van Helsing from 2000 and what is it? 4? 5? 4.
4.
It's the best of the CineCringe, I think, in terms of movie quality.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good contrast to what we did last week, which is the worst. Potentially.
The worst?
The Mac and Me. I still love this movie. It is.
Okay. I'm glad. Me too.
Yeah, it's just a guilty pleasure. The performance, the story, it is cringy at so many parts. So that still fits the theme of the channel. But the movie knows what it is.
If you feel like it's not a cringy movie, just go watch the last scene of the movie again.
It's alive! It's alive!
Thunder and lightning, and all the gears are turning, there are sparks flying, and his face is all sweaty from just sciencing so hard.
The music is so intense, and it's like this opening sequence in black and white. It rides a very thin line between like paying homage and just stealing.
The other thin line it rides is honestly, it's like 1 inch off spoof. It's so close to tipping over into outright making fun of the material, but it never does.
Success!
Richard here, playing Dracula, I think, very similar to Poison Ivy and Batman and Robin. I think he is the one on set who knew exactly what kind of movie he's in.
Yeah.
And he just went for it. And it's great.
There are like 10 or 20 times where someone epically screams like no or why or whatever in this movie, because it's just that kind of movie. But in this particular yell, he just has this real operatic vibrato to his voice the whole time. And that choice just made me really happy. It's just so openly epic. This movie's just so epic right off the top, and it just put a grin on my face.
I wish the rest of the movie actually is in black and white. And
it works really well. Yeah.
But like it also has to stay this melodramatic and this over the top, because it doesn't. And that's kind of where it falls apart a little bit later on. I really like that music. It feels like game trailer music. The problem is that it doesn't match what's going on, because it's just a slow, meandering, panning shot of the city.
You mentioned that there's CG and that it doesn't always look very good, and this is one of those cases, and they did not shy away from it. It's just like a ton of full-on CG characters doing shit over in like big, long sequences. There was still this kind of this traditional filmmaking style in the way they decided to compose a lot of these shots and compose a lot of this sequence that I did think still held up.
In this scene, it leads into the moment where Van Helsing cuts off Mr. Hyde's arm. And this is when I kind of thought that I think this movie could have really benefited from an R rating instead of PG-13.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many straightforward horror elements.
Yeah.
That it would have been a very easy fit.
Or maybe I just wanted to see the brides go full, Paul Verhoeven.
Van Helsing!
Van Helsing works for the church to a certain extent in this world, right?
Yeah.
And the existence of these monsters is fairly well known to the people.
Clearly.
Yeah. So I feel like the police should know who Jekyll and Hyde is and what he's done, right?
Yeah. I agree with that. It doesn't seem like any of this is secret.
Because they established this whole, like this moment seems to establish the people hate you for your service kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go anywhere.
No. One element that I really love that they establish here is that he's not just like Vatican cop, but he's like the loose cannon Vatican cop where they're like, you always go off on you have your own methods and you leave a trail of destruction. And he's basically exactly like Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon or in real life. Immediately after they establish him as a loose cannon cop, they also just establish him as like straight up James Bond.
Yeah.
Because the next sequence is just a straight up exactly like James Bond like super spy briefing where they have this medieval projector that's showing slides, and then we introduce the Q
Yes.
of this world who has exactly the same relationship to Van Helsing that Q has to James Bond. As they introduced Kate Beckinsale, and there's this misdirect with her brother character where you think he's going to be a big part of it too. They're just all so hot. And they all have these like long flowing locks of hair and stuff. And I wished that movies were a bit more like this more often. Yeah. The way you put together a fantasy world, it's like, well, it's fantasy, so everyone obviously is like 10 out of 10, just gratuitously sexy.
First thing is, I wonder, is this the last time werewolves were shown as like these sort of bestial but like kind of humanoid forms? Because I really like this kind of werewolf, and not the, you know, bullshit Twilight one that's like basically just a dog, and then like or like the malnourished looking things in Harry Potter. And I think the reason I really like it is because it's very video game-esque.
I feel like there's a British one called Howl, I think. I might be getting that wrong. It's a British one set on a train with werewolves, and that had pretty cool werewolves.
Yeah, okay, so the plot continues, and they trap the werewolf, but the brother blunders and drops his gun with the silver bullets, and things kind of go wrong. We are to think that the brother dies with the werewolf, and which then kicks off the sort of B plot, which, to be honest, I really didn't care for.
Like the whole brother
B plot is,
yeah,
it's not interesting to me.
No. So they're welcomed to, well, they are not very welcomed to Transylvania, where people just hang around in mobs. And it seems that since that time of their showdown with Frankenstein, the mob has just continued their work as mob. Kate Beckinsale has so much fun in this movie.
Yeah, she
stands
what movie
in
this was.
So many poses. So many like fantasy book cover poses.
This year, she still looks like this.
Yeah,
she might be a vampire.
Yeah. She made 6 movies about it.
That's true. The Brides of Dracula shows up, and they're attacking town. Now, question again. Is this the last time we see vampires shown in these bestial but humanoid forms?
Yeah, right.
I think after this, vampires went into the pretty realm, right? Not that these ones aren't, but they have this like monstrous form.
Maybe the curse is that Van Helsing, this movie got it almost right. But not quite right. Like, this is the version of the universe that I would have liked to continue. But maybe the fact that it was underwhelming meant that the next time they rebooted it, everyone had to be pitching like, well, it's not like Van Helsing. It's gonna be, we're gonna go the opposite direction. I was the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV meme. I was just like, they did it. They did the joke.
Yeah.
The thing we used to do in movies all the time. That's all I remember from going to the theater as a kid. Every movie just had a joke, some version of this joke. We didn't mention earlier that one of the things that Q gives Van Helsing here is crossbow machine gun. And it's like a pretty epic looking weapon, and it's you're kind of like excited for him to bust it out. And he's really he sucks.
Yeah.
He fires hundreds of crossbow bolts and does not hit shit.
Yeah, but it is such a cool piece of weapon. I mean, again, it's so video gamey.
Yeah, I can just imagine the moment of finding that weapon in the game. One thing I'm so happy this movie does is that it always takes a little time, even though for the most part, it's just this incredibly fast-paced action movie that essentially functions like a superhero movie or something. They do always take the time to do these little horror sequences, and so we get ones like we were just seeing where the Bride of Dracula just kind of like hangs around in the shadows and like fucks with Kate Beckinsale for a while and says scary things, and she has this ridiculous line where she
30 years old, perfectly aged.
It doesn't always necessarily fit in the movie, but it doesn't really matter because it just makes you so happy that they just do these like classic horror setups where someone's revealed like hanging up from the roof or whatever.
Too bad. So sad.
This line always stuck with me, and for years I still remember it. Such a bizarre mix that represents the whole film, because it's a really terrible line of dialogue and performed in a really over-the-top way that would be bad in any other context, but like it's kind of seductive, and it's like I hate it but I love it kind of way.
I think what I'm hearing again is that you have deep and complicated feelings for the Brides of Dracula in 2004's Van Helsing. Our hapless hero Van Helsing manages to hit something with his like 1050th crossbow bolt. Really loved the enthusiasm and effort put into giving her an awesome death scene. This really flashed me back to how that used to be a thing more in movies, to have like an epic, interesting death.
Yeah, we definitely don't get that kind of Raiders Lost Ark face-melting death anymore.
No, exactly, Raiders, yeah. These sequences are just so thrilling because they're filled with visual comedy. They're filled with these virtuosic performances that are so over the top and hammy. And it just always goes further than you expect it to.
It feels like I've seen movies where the film and the director is lazier, and this scene would have been them on the ground wailing and talking to each other normally.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason to go out of your way to show this and have like these, I mean, the carvings on the walls are animated. All of this takes extra effort, but it adds so much flavor.
I was, if anything, like enjoying this more than last time I watched it because I knew what the story was and I was able to take some more time to just look at everything. And I, like I was saying, I was just really rewarded by looking at everything. You know, vampires aren't just like people with some plastic teeth in them. They're like these insane creatures that have been living for hundreds of years and have like a totally different experience of the world, and they can fly and they can walk up walls and they can do all this shit. So of course they're maniacs. Of course they talk in these outrageously epic and grandiloquent ways. I wanted to hear your thoughts on like their chemistry as actors, because I wrote down like they have perfect chemistry for a movie like this because they basically have like anti-chemistry. They're both giving pretty terrible performances. They both have nonsense accents. And the way it comes off to me is that as actors, they're both just like focusing on making themselves look good and getting their own little moments in for the camera. And they're not that compelled as far as like, you know, like building chemistry with the other person and like having an actual romance. But I felt like that's exactly the way the performances should have been.
It felt like the two actors didn't really want to be there at some point, but then the characters also didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And it just worked actually. Happenstance. Yeah.
You're choking me!
Give me reason not to.
Hugh Jackman's Brazzers audition.
Why did she shout, "You're choking me"? He knows. She knows. We know. What was the point of that?
Which reminds me, if you're interested in listening to the full-length discussion of this episode, you can find it on our Patreon. The link is on screen and in the description down below. If you go over there, you will get the entire recording in an audio format like a podcast. Check it out. Support us. Help us keep doing this. We really appreciate it. Anyways.
Again, so much on screen. More than you could ever take in. And not only that, but it's happening in a sequence that is just a simple exposition sequence. Like, this scene's just some more bad guy planning. It's not like a big deal. And yet there's so much thrown at you. And you kind of get the feeling that there's so much thrown at you just because they know it's boring too. So they're like, I'm just going to give you as much as possible. Do, however, suffer a Batman and Robin problem that we talked about, in that when you get the two main characters alone and they try to do anything dramatic, it gets so real bad.
Yeah. These are it's funny. The lead actors are the reason why this movie's low rating.
Yeah, and it's too bad. Yeah, I think like you said too, if it had been Hugh Jackman 4 years later, I think he would have known exactly how to do this movie, and he would have knocked it out of the park. Yeah, well, actually, now that I'm saying it, like 4 years later was Australia, and Hugh Jackman like sexy in the firelight pouring a kettle of water on his body. So yeah,
Under the moon, yeah. So, vampires being immortal but dead, which means that they're ageless. So does that mean these vampire babies are just gonna stay like this kind of imp form for eternity? If they're immortal but they're dead, that means they'll never grow. And if they never grow, all you really have is just thousands and thousands of bats.
What you're asking makes sense. Yeah, I guess maybe they are just like that.
Yeah, in which case then I feel like when two vampires breed in this universe, it's a diminishing return because they are more feral and less functional. And by the third generation, they're basically just down to bats again.
How do you know he has copper teeth?
Because he's standing right behind you.
I feel like they really did Hugh Jackman a disservice here because that line is too long to be like a quick in the moment line.
Yeah.
So it really does feel like everyone just has to pause for him to complete the joke.
We're back to the video game thing where you're at a dialogue choice scene. And
Totally.
as you're reading, all the NPCs are waiting for you awkwardly. The movie really treats Frankenstein's monster poorly.
This is what Caroline kept saying. Every time she saw him, she was like, this guy's story is so sad.
Yeah.
It starts at the end of Frankenstein, which is bad enough for the monster.
Yeah.
He happens to get away, but then it's just like unrelenting misery from that point on for him. There's an absolutely hilarious play on the classic, like, bad guy hears a noise and goes behind a door, and then you hear him get knocked out, and then good guy walks out wearing his clothes or whatever. They do it here, except that he's like flies off screen on a trapeze, and then you hear him get knocked out, and then Van Helsing trapezes in. So great.
Within 1 second.
Yeah. Kate Beckinsale realizes that there are hundreds of vampires, and her immediate instinct is just to grab the mace off the wall and start swinging it. And she, despite the fact that she freely admits she hasn't killed a single vampire, she's ready to go toe-to-toe with 150 right now in her red dress. One thing we forgot to say, I think, is that Van Helsing got werewolfed a little while ago, so now he's going to turn into a werewolf in 2 nights. And I'm pretty sure his oncoming werewolfism causes him to violently ejaculate in this scene here.
Anyways, yeah, the whole B-plot with the brother and Van Helsing werewolf, I don't know. It's boring. Nothing really happens for quite a while. A lot of night scenes, as we described earlier.
Yeah, again, that thing of just when the heroes are just together, you're not too excited.
Despite the fact that I love the design of the werewolf and the vampire bestial form, I kind of wish there was more fight between the actors a little bit, or at least going back and forth.
I mean, it seems a real shame not to have some swashbuckling, like sword fighting. Like Dracula could be like, standing on the roof and sword fighting with Van Helsing, like standing on a banister or whatever.
Because we spent all this time seeing Van Helsing's gadgets and his like trickery and his setups and all those things against opponents that are much bigger than him and stronger than him, and then he just goes immediately into Hulk mode, and it's just a CGI monster fight, which is cool in a certain way, but it would have been better if it was back and forth.
There's an epic, tragic ending, actually, which I felt was kind of a surprise for this movie. Having become a werewolf, Van Helsing is able to defeat Dracula, but unfortunately, he then leaps upon Anna. She, in her last moments of life, manages to stab him with the antidote, but she dies. Well, which I happen to see coming because of that awful scene about never having been to the sea, but still comes as a fair bit of surprise, I think, for a movie like this.
Unfortunately, what shit the bed a little bit for me was the way to mourn her is through this really terrible PNG in the cloud.
Yes.
And it just, I don't know. It looks like one of those like homemade in memoriam.
Yes,
through Windows Movie Maker. I think like at the end of the day, I think this is the perfect kind of movie to get drunk and watch with your friends with, because like there is just a right amount of cheesy, campy, sexy acting for your friends to laugh at together. But then there's also like long stretches of bullshit plot that no one cares about, and those are like the exact moments where you would, get up, talk, or like go get drinks or do a bong rip or whatever.
I also just thought a lot of the Marvel ingredients were here. So I talked about there's a lot of just like winking at the audience, and there's a lot of irony. The tone felt very similar to Marvel. The structure in how they used the supporting characters, I thought felt very similar to Marvel. In the MCU era, really made me see very clearly like how there were existing currents in Hollywood leading up to what became Marvel.
For sure. I can definitely see the DNA, or this movie being in the DNA of the current Marvel movies, especially the earlier ones. I can see a very close resemblance between this and like I guess the technically the first Marvel movie would be the Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton.
This for me is a solid 7 out of 10 movie. Cannot go higher because there is no content It is just pure, like, fun nonsense. All of the things that are shitty about it don't matter at all. It's a total fun ride from start to finish.
Enjoy for what it is, which is over-the-top melodrama cheese, and it's great.
Originally, we had a different movie planned for next week, but since we recorded this episode, we found out that Roland Emmerich's latest disaster movie, Moonfall, is now digitally available, so we are going to do that instead.
Yeah,
Okay,
press like,
I wish you will.
subscribe, all of that shit.
Send us hangover cures.